So this is like not a video I usually make because like so far I've only really talked about like video games and sort of like analyzing and describing what happens in them and kind of how it makes you feel. But there's a very important thing because lately I've been playing a lot of multiplayer games, right? So I've been playing Dead by Daylight, Deadlock, and Marvel Rivals, which, like I've said, are going to be the main focuses of this video. And we're going to start with the Deadlock. But the thing is, I talk in my videos a lot about how, games make you feel, about how music makes you feel. Something that I haven't talked about yet, because you can't really talk about this in like a single player game, is how other people make you feel. Right? And I think that's really important because multiplayer games are like a part of a lot of people's lives. Is it a bad thing for you to only play multiplayer games or for you to only play single player games? I think it's important to like play both, There's a lot of type of games out there. There's like single player and multiplayer, of course, but then you have, real-time strategy, you have MOBAs, you have hero shooters, you have asymmetrical games, so that's like Dead by Daylight and stuff like that. You have like kind of like peak stuff like that, like friend, I hate using the word friend slot, but I don't really know what else to call them, like Lethal Company, where it's like a co-op experience, meant to be played with friends, meant to be, enjoyed with someone else. Me and my friends have recently been playing Peak. We can we can barely make it like to the first checkpoint, so it is definitely a hard game, but it's also fun. But I will say, even games like these, games like Lethal Company, games like Peak, that the whole scope is even Left 4 Dead, you could say, where the whole scope is like playing together and as a team. You kind of, to a certain extent, you need everybody kind of on the same page. So, if even like co-op games that are just supposed to be, working together, even something like Overcooked, if like sort of, let's say you're trying to play like Peak with your friends, but someone's not really feeling up for it, and they decide to play anyway. That's kind of gonna bring the energy down for a few other people, that you're playing with. And where I'm kind of going with this is kind of just to explain, like, regardless of the game you're playing, if it is a multiplayer game, it will affect, like, the other people will affect you in a way. Either you are having the time of your life or you are having a terrible time. And in a lot of these games that I'm going to talk about today, which is, the 3 games I mentioned, we're going to start with Deadlock in just a second. It's a lot of people play these games. They're multiplayer, but they also solo queue, right? Like there's hundreds of servers for all of these games that I've just mentioned, that I've just gone over, like Discord servers. You can probably go on Reddit and just like find people to play with, right? But as someone who went out of her way not only to go on the Dead by Daylight Discord and try and find people to play, like all the time, like I'm constantly trying to find people to play with, all the time. Not only do I do that, but I've also created my own Discord server to find people to play Dead by Daylight with. It is a transgender only server because that is my preference, but it is that far that even if we have these tools to find other people to play with, it is still not gonna work, and you're still gonna have to solo queue. So for a lot of people, the normal experience of playing something like Marvel Rivals, something like Dead by Daylight, something like Deadlock, something like League of Legends, if you want to bring that up, I don't really want to talk about League of Legends too much, but bringing these things up is a lot of people play by themselves. They solo queue. Maybe their friends aren't around and they just want to play a little bit. Or maybe they just generally have no friends to play the game and stuff like that. It's all, I think that's important, that we have to look at it from this perspective, that a lot of the time you're playing these games in solo queue. If you're playing, because if you're playing these games with a friend, a lot of the time it becomes less of an issue of, oh, you're throwing, or oh, you're not doing too well. Well, it doesn't matter, you're with your friend, and at least you can make some kind of fun of it. Like, you're losing, but you can enjoy it. So, without further ado, I am gonna get into it finally. Like, Deadlock, right? This is, I wasn't sure how I was gonna structure this video, but I think Deadlock is the best point to start, because I also feel like when it comes to Deadlock, the toxicity that comes from, like, in Deadlock is not really directed personally, in my experience at least. So when you play Deadlock, right? And for those of you who don't know, Deadlock is a MOBA shooter, sort of like Smite. It's a movement shooter. It's a spiritual successor to Dota. Is Dota 2 at least is the way I've heard people call it. I've never really played Dota much, but it shares a lot of the qualities of Dota 2. So in a way you could call it a spiritual successor, but with a lot of added on things. It is a third person movement shooter MOBA. And it is an amazing game. And if you don't know much about Deadlock, I think that kind of summarizes it. But a very important part of the game is the characters. Just like it's sort of, I don't know if you would call it a hero shooters, but it has characters and everyone can only play one character at a time. Now, I should explain how selecting characters in this game actually works. There's 2 teams of 6 people, or, well, 2 teams of 4 people if you're playing the Street Brawl mode, but we're not really need to go over that. And before you start a game, you will be asked to select up to 3 or 4 characters. You can set a priority as, oh, I want high priority on Billy, and then I want priority on Celeste, and then I'd like to simply add to my roster someone like Viscous. So in this scenario, I want Billy the most. Then if I don't get Billy, the game can give me Celeste. And if both of these characters are taken or banned, I will be given Viscous. There's already a little bit of an issue with this way of selecting characters, and while I understand you cannot make a fail-proof way of selecting characters, especially because everyone in each game can only have one character, right? So there can only be one Celeste in each game. There's not gonna be a second Celeste on the enemy team. That was only during the April event where the entire game could be one character, which I had a lot of fun in. It was pretty great, especially if you had friends, or just find people online to do, 5 Abrams, or not 5, 6 Abrams, or 6 sevens, 6-7. But, that's all to say that the character selection in this game, first of all, is not always the best, right? I have had many times where, oh, I really want to play Celeste, or, oh, I really want to play Billy. Doesn't matter the character. And despite me doing high priority on that character, I'm not giving the character. And then, that can really make you feel bad when you're playing the game. Like, oh, you hop on, you're like, oh, I want to play this one character. I want to learn them. I like their aesthetic. They're one of my best characters. I just feel like playing them. And you don't get that character. And this might seem a bit strange to people who don't play Deadlock, or to people who do not play MOBAs, as these games can go on for, like, an average game is probably going to go over 30 minutes. Especially the lower rank you are, games definitely go over 30 minutes. Around 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe an hour is when, it's kind of like a sweet spot where most games usually end by that point. You get tired and you just don't want to play anymore. So your brain kind of starts to make mistakes. You play badly. The enemy team everybody has full builds. It all ends at some point. But what I really wanted to bring up is how, not getting the character you want can really ruin your mood, especially if you have to play the next 45 minutes to an hour as a character you didn't really plan on playing as. Because as much as it's like, oh, I'll put my first priority on that character, and this character can also have priority, you want to play as that first character. And this is brought up to kind of add context a little bit later on. But regardless, you load into your game of Deadlock, and then you see the enemy team, and you are just filled with dread. Because one thing about Deadlock is it is majorly unbalanced. The good thing is it's mostly unbalanced for every character in the game. Whether you play Billy, whether you play Infernus, whether you play Yamato or Graves, to a certain extent, each character has something to them that makes them dreadful to play against. If played correctly, yeah, they can all be incredibly powerful. A Graves player can destroy your entire game and can be a server admin, or they can be useless. A lot of the time, the useless ones are on my team, for the record. Same thing with a 7 and a Wraith, same thing with a Lash and a Bebop. They can either be useless, or they can be the best player on your team. Because all of these characters are broken. They're all unbalanced. But it's a sense of being unbalanced to where every character can just, dominate if they're played correctly. Right? Because a lot of the time in these games, you're gonna have most of your team's gonna be pretty bad at the game, and then you're gonna have one or two people in your team actually doing something. And that's why you need unbalanced characters the way Deadlock has. Especially with the shop system, items can break or make your character, they can counter each other, they can do a lot of stuff. So that's something we all have to sort of keep in mind, is that when it comes to Deadlock, it is unbalanced, but the unbalancing is in everybody's favor. Everybody's. While I do admit some characters do get the short end of the stick, generally, they're also really trying to make every character viable and make every character fun to play. In the newest batch of characters they added in the Old Gods update, you can tell they've kind of finally found a sweet spot for character design. I think it was good enough when they added Billy and Mina and Drifter and Doorman. I think those were good enough already. But, the newest characters, Silver, Venator, Graves, Rem, Celeste, and Apollo, they're great. They all feel amazing to play. They're all great aesthetically. And, most of the games I play, I'm like, oh, I'd like to play as one of these new characters. I mean, Apollo's fun, Celeste is fun. Graves is alright, I just find Graves kind of boring. But besides, the point I'm trying to make is, I think a lot of people forget that. I think a lot of people, when they play Deadlock, especially if you're doing bad in the game, you're only sort of gonna do worse, right? Let's say you keep dying in lane, and a lot of people don't understand this, is that, in Deadlock, you don't lose the lane. You can lose the lane, but you don't lose the game simply for dying a bunch in lane, in all honesty. And a lot of people, when they do badly, they look at the enemy character, they look at the opposite character, and they're like, that's broken. And that's where a lot of the toxicity in this game comes from. That is where a lot of the issues with the fan base, with the community, comes from. People absolutely hate the characters in this game that they do not play. And it took me a while to get to this point because I had to set up a little bit of context and a little bit of lore that we're going to come back to. But oh my god, go into any Deadlock related social space, whether it's Reddit or Discord, Twitter, forums, people will hate on any character. Okay? I'm someone who plays Billy. People hate Billy. People hate Shiv. People hate Victor. People hate Rem, Graves, Infernus, Seven, Calico. Every single character, there will be someone out there who believes they are broken, that they are the spawn of Satan. And that's funny to me, because a lot of the times when you play Deadlock, you know, you will get a lot of comments, especially if you're doing well on a character that is believed to be busted. So for example, let's say you're doing great on Graves, right? And the enemy team is just gonna start flaming you, you know, but a lot of their insults are around the fact that you play Graves, right? They will insult you, but they are insulting you for the fact that you play Graves. Had you played any other character possibly, they would have no problem with you being better than them. But they have a problem with the fact that you are playing Graves and you are winning, that you are doing better. And I find that so funny, because a lot of the times when I play with my buddy Jean-Pierre and my buddy Ronnie. We play as a trio or a duo sometimes, it depending on who's available. But a lot of the time when people flame us in-game, we kind of try and make a joke out of it. I get pissed. I hate Doorman. Like, I am the prime example of what I'm trying to talk about this in this video. But whenever I find a Doorman that is annoying me beyond any shadow of a doubt, I'm just gonna make a joke out of it. I'm going to throw, I'll tell them I'm going to throw rocks at you, but it's nothing personal. And they'll reply they'll get the joke. They'll be like, yeah, okay, well that's gonna hurt, but it's not impersonal, right? You're like, yeah, it's not impersonal. I don't hate you. I don't hate you because the character you play. I hate your character. I hate your ultimate. I hate your bell nukes. I hate that. But everybody has a character they hate in this game. That's why I find it very funny when people try and act high and mighty, like, oh, really, you're hating on this character? Like, you have a character you hate, you're just not bringing it up because you want to look good. Buddy, calm down, okay? I just find it very funny how, people, kind of, like, I find it, that's the toxicity in this game. And a lot of people will mistake it for, oh, this is a personal attack. That is not a personal attack. They are attacking the character you play and you because you play the character, but otherwise they will not say much to you. The issue is not about you, it is about the character you play. And this is where we kind of refer back to the character selection in this game. Because as I mentioned before, you have to select up to 3 or 4 characters, right? Priority, low priority, stuff like that. So you might get a character you didn't even want to play. You might be playing on random and have never touched this character before. You are doing badly, either because you're not in the mood to play that character, or you just have never played this character before because you're playing random, because you want to have fun with your friends, and the enemy team will flame you for you doing bad on a perceived broken or easy character. There is no winning. If you're winning, they will hate you for it. If you're losing, they will make fun of you for it, because your character, in their eyes, your character is like good, your character is busted, your character is easy, your character is super broken. So there is no winning, but at the same time, it's not personal, really. I never find it to be personal. Nobody is attacking you personally. They are attacking you for the character you play. But it is regardless of that, people will take any chance to dunk on someone who is playing a character they hate. So in that sense, toxicity in Deadlock doesn't come from your actions, more so than it comes from the way people just hate on characters. And I find that hilarious. A lot of toxicity in the game also comes from losing the lane or dying a bunch of times. The amount of times I've played a game and my 7, and I keep bringing 7 up a lot, is because a lot of the 7s in my team will throw the game. They will throw the game. They will have 12 deaths by 10 minutes. I don't know how that's possible, but they will do it. Trust me, they will do it. I don't know how that's possible, but they will do it, you know? And it's stuff like this that, you will play the game and kind of try to enjoy it, but the moment someone dies like 5 times in lane, they're just decided the game's over, then they want to leave. They want to do I think this game should have a surrender button? I don't know, because on one hand, yes, can you make comebacks? That's correct, you know. But is it worth trying to make a comeback? I I don't know how to explain this, but sometimes your team just gets diffed. Sometimes you just get diffed in the first 10 minutes and you kind of know it. You can try, but like your team will have mentally checked out by then. you know so should they add a surrender button? I generally don't know, because a lot of the games you play, at least you kind of learn something from it, in my opinion. At least you learn something from it, at least you get some good plays that kind of make you feel good. But there are some games in this game, there are some matches that will absolutely make you depressed. I have had a few matches like in this game, like every few months, maybe every few weeks sometimes, there will be a match that is so dreadful to play through, right? Like the enemy team has just a terrible team comp. Your team is mentally checked out in like the first 10 minutes and you're just trying and trying to do something, right? And it's just dreadful. You are CC, there's just like 50 knockdowns on the enemy team. There is silencing wave, there is curse relic, and you just have to eat it. And like when I have games like that where I'm just uber stomped and I just genuinely cannot do anything, I have to take like a break for a week from the game. I'm not gonna lie. I take a lot of breaks from Deadlock, and I think a lot of people should too. Especially because, if you spend any amount of time on the internet around Deadlock players, they will mention how they're going on like 10 game loss streaks. Yeah, maybe just take a break. Maybe just take a break for like a few days or a week or two. And when you're back, Yoshi's gonna give you an actually good team that can carry you. You know, it's everything with Deadlock is, and I think MOBAs in general, it like the people are just like they hate the game they play. Like seriously, people just hate the game they play. Why do you play it? Like I don't know. You hate the characters, right? Characters too busted, too broken, too powerful, right? You hate the characters, right? Why do you play the game? Why do people like genuinely normalize just taking a break or stopping playing a game? Like I understand a lot of people who start playing Deadlock get addicted to it for maybe like a month, and then it's like, then it just becomes depressing, right? But what like I think there was a journey in your like Deadlock journey, right? Where honeymoon phase, then it's the depressing phase, and then if you make it through that, then you just kind of start enjoying the game in general. I think a very big part of Deadlock right now is it's a closed beta game. So they're trying a lot of stuff, they're changing a lot of stuff. And nothing is really set in stone. It's also like pretty badly unoptimized in my opinion. Like the game has a very hard time running on some computers and stuff like that, like which is very unfortunate. Do I think the game is great? Yes. Do I think it's gonna make it very far when it eventually comes out and all of these issues are fixed? Yes. But for the moment, I think like a lot of people who play this game just need to take a break from it. You hate the character, you hate the game, you hate the community, you hate, you die, you just want to quit the game, go next. And I think this is not only a problem of MOBA games, but a problem with people coming over from hero shooter games. Expecting this to be like a hero shooter, and I'm bringing this up because I'm gonna go into Marvel Rivals next. But I really think a lot of people who play Deadlock, they come to Deadlock expecting it to be like Overwatch, like Marvel Rivals, like other hero shooter like Paladins, right? Like because it kind of deceptively looks like that in the way that it's like a third person shooter. and you have like 4 abilities and stuff like that, but then it's like, oh, macro, you have to learn that. And I think that's a very big like crossroads for a lot of people. Like, you get into Deadlock, but it's not a hero, it's like more than a hero shooter. It's an amazing game. When you sit down, you try and learn it, and you don't get angry at every single thing that happens in the game. It is an amazing game. But the people hate it. The people who play Deadlock hate their own game. Like, it's genuinely sad. But if there's one thing I can leave from like talking about Deadlock, is honestly, if you are genuinely not enjoying your games of Deadlock, or if you find yourself just complaining every game about the enemy characters, take a break. Go play something else. Go play a single player game. Take a break, because that is what you need. Because you just sound like you hate your game. And that's gonna be a very reoccurring topic, with people just hating their game. Like the game that they play. Anyways, I kind of talked a little bit about Deadlock and how Toxicity works here, so we're gonna move on to Marvel Rivals. You know, first things first about Marvel Rivals, I think a lot of people who are probably watching this video know what that is. Like, they know what the game is. But regardless, we're still gonna give a little bit of a history lesson on what Marvel Rival is. Because I've been a player of Marvel Rivals since Season 1. And I feel like I can give a fair bit of, like, explaining everything about it. I have taken a lot of breaks from Marvel Rivals. Like, I think you need to. There are some seasons that are just genuinely unfun, you know? When certain characters come out and they're insanely broken. Like, it is just unfun sometimes. Regardless of that, you know, Marvel Rivals, you know, it came out, and I feel like a lot of people, you know, a lot of people play Marvel Rivals because it's a Marvel game. You know, would people play Marvel Rivals if it was the exact same game, but instead of Marvel characters, it was like an original, you know, story, original characters, and original everything? We don't know. But I do believe that a large part of the player base would not be here if this was not Marvel. Marvel games have not exactly had the best reputation in the last decades. I mean, you've had the Lego games, those were great, and then you had that Marvel Avengers game, which I played. I put like maybe 100 to 200 hours into that game. It was terrible. But it was like, I'm a Marvel fan, you know, I like Marvel. A lot of people do. Like, I like the superheroes. I love Wolverine. I love Thor. I like Captain America. You know, I like, you know, all of these characters. A lot of them. They're very likable. Even if I didn't care about them, once I played Marvel Rivals, it helped open me up to a lot of new characters for me to like. So, you know, when Marvel Rivals showed up, I was like, oh my god, it's a multiplayer shooter game, you know, hero shooter with like some of my favorite characters, you know? And that's great, you know? That's great. Only one thing, I never really played hero shooters before. I never touched Overwatch. I've never liked Overwatch. I've never been a fan. You know why? You want to know why I've never been a fan of Overwatch? Is because you have to pick these roles, right? You have to play support, or damage dealer, or tank, right? And I didn't really bring this up in Deadlock, but Deadlock doesn't have this. You can play whoever you want. There's some characters in Deadlock that are more suited for a support role, or other characters that are suited for a carry role or a tank role. But due to the items and the way you can scale in-game, most characters can sort of cover multiple bases. So, but what I'm trying to say is that when you play Deadlock, you don't have to play, you know, a tank. You don't have to play a tank. You don't have to play a DPS. You don't have to do things like that. You can just play whoever you want. When it comes to games like Overwatch and Marvel Rivals, that's kind of not a possibility. And this is I think this is one of the root issues in the toxicity in games like Marvel Rivals and Overwatch or any game similar to it. I know League of Legends also has AD carry, top lane, which would be the tank. It has mid lane. It also has roles, but I'm not, invested enough in League of Legends. And I simply, I don't care enough to really look into how toxicity happens in that game. Because personally, I've never interacted with League on a social level. Have I played League of Legends? Yes. But I played League of Legends knowing the reputation that people have. So I just decided to instantly mute everybody I play with. Every game, just turn off, all chats and everything else. It really helps. For Marvel Rivals, however, I was a bit optimistic. I was like, oh, I'm sure I'm gonna meet great people when, playing Marvel Rivals, playing this game. And I'll say one thing. A lot of the toxicity in Marvel Rivals does not take place in-game. Which you might say, that's very interesting. I'll explain it in a second. But as I brought up a second ago, that this game has, similar to Overwatch, it has these roles. It has strategist, vanguard, and duelist, I think. They basically just stand-ins for tank support and DPS, damage dealer, right? So a lot of the frustrations in this game, me personally, is the fact that you may have some of your favorite characters. However, the problem is they either do not like the character you want to play, the character you like, for example, Wolverine, is either not the role you like to play. For example, I'm someone who likes to play support and tank much more than damage. So, as much as I'd like to play Wolverine, I'm just not suited for the role. But even if I wanted to learn the role of DPS, something you find when you play Marvel Rivals is that everybody wants to play DPS, everybody wants to play damage. A lot of people don't really want to play support or tank. Now, when the game originally came out, it was, it was quite a mishmash, but people generally played tank. The big issue when this game came out was finding people to play support, because nobody really wanted to play support. Right? So for the first few seasons, it was the struggle of playing support, right? Like finding people to play support. And then at some point, there was sort of a golden era. I would say it was around season 2 of the game. There was like a golden era when, as much as Emma Frost was a horrific character to play against, times were a lot simpler. And I feel like people were running double tank, people were running double healer, people were running dual damage, Like it was a simpler time. You had the rise of the triple support. You had the rise of the triple support, 2 tanks, 1 DPS, 3 supports. That shit was crazy. It was insane. It was better times than we have now. Because now, in season, I think it's about to be season 9, we have a tank issue in this game. And I'm gonna rant a little bit before I get exactly into the toxicity of this game. But we have a tank problem in this game. It is terrible. It is terrible. You will try and play the game. Maybe you want to play DPS, and they already got 3 DPSs on their team. You want to play support, they already insta-lock to supports. People they're fine with playing support. Nobody wants to play tank though. Nobody wants to play tank. So you gotta play tank and you gotta endure it. Because one big issue in this game, which which might come from how they initially intended to not advertise the game, but to monetize the game. Originally, Marvel Rivals, at some point in its development, they wanted to make characters so that you have to buy them, you have to pay money for the character, right? Now, I'm not sure if this was pay to win, pay, real money only, or if you could actually unlock the characters to gameplay. I'd assume you would be given a few characters for free to start out with. That would probably make sense. But in the end, they chose to go with the route where all the characters are free. It's more accessible that way, and you can sell more skins to characters you already own, instead of spending money on unlocking a character and then also spending money on a skin. It kind of seems simple, in retrospective, but the reason I bring this up is because, as I've stated, the game has 3 roles. Well, they're not all given resources, I cannot spell. They're not all given resources equally, and what I mean by that is, while I do not recall the exact number, duelists are by far, now at least, well, it's always been the case, but they're by far the largest number of characters in the roster. I believe the game barely has 20 tanks, and barely has 20 healers, but I think there's about 30 DPS characters or something like that, which is absolutely hilarious, to say the least. I think that's hilarious. And also, what goes into this is, well, I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, since I'm not a game developer, but what I'm trying to explain is, tank characters in this game are extremely mundane. They feel incredibly boring to play, in my opinion. Are they interesting? Do I love the Thing? Do I love Captain America? Do I love Emma Frost? Not Captain Frost, Emma Frost. Yes, I love these characters. They're amazing. Are they kind of boring to play? Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, yes, because they're not given interesting kits, interesting abilities. A lot of the characters just kind of punch and maybe have a shield and some sort of, defensive ability. And that's kind of it. And you might say, oh, well, that's what the tanks gotta do. They gotta shield, they gotta protect the team. Well, yeah, but, you want to make it interesting. You want to make it fun. You look at Duelist. You have all the Duelist characters in this game. All the Duelists almost all of them have entirely different kits. Entirely different abilities. You have poke characters. You have dive characters. You have brawl characters. But they're all so different, so unique from each other. But then you go over to tank, and you're either a ranged tank or a melee tank, and that's it. At some point they added Angela, and Angela is one of those tanks where she's really not the kind of tank to stay in the middle of the road and keep her shield up and protect the team. She's the kind of tank that, she's supposed to go around and put the enemies in a bad spot, maybe get some picks even, distract the enemies. Captain America is supposed to do the same thing, but, that's just something that, you're not expected, A lot of people just expect you to play a character like Doctor Strange or Magneto and just sit in the middle with your shield. That's what a lot of people expect, especially if you're solo tanking. Angela is a very hard option because, yes, you might want to play Angela since you're solo tanking, but that might just not be great for the game because a lot of teams in Marvel Rivals don't know how to play around having an Angela tank or a Rogue tank or something like the Thing. The Thing's sort of very weird place because he is the only really way to play the Thing is to kind of just charge in, but at the same time is, again, the thing is a character that all he really has is three abilities. He has his punches, he has his dash, and he has his, like you can jump to enemies or to allies. Like that's really kind of all he has. And, as much as I like the thing, he's kind of boring to play. Angela's pretty great, but she has like two abilities. She just spears people and, you know, drops down on the ground and has her axes, and all you do is just hold your attack button, and you win or you die. Like, that's kind of the point I'm trying to get across, is no matter what the tanks, like, no matter how they try and make the tanks, they're sort of just boring. And I get it, a tank is supposed to be a large character that takes damage and is supposed to like defend the backline, but at the same time, it's just a bit, can we not have interesting tanks? Something like Cyclops just came out. He is incredibly fun to play. I've played him in 18 versus 18. He has a very fun moveset, very satisfying to play, because you get to hit everybody with your beam, right? The ricochets and everything. Um, you know, it's incredibly fun, and it's very engaging. It's very engaging. You play like a dive character like Black Panther or Magic. I love those characters as well. Very engaging, very fun. The only characters, I would say the only character that's actually kind of boring as a duelist is Wolverine, because really you're just holding your attack button the entire time and you're just jumping in there. He's probably the most boring duelist to play. Spider-Man is one of Marvel's most beloved characters, and he's one of the most fun characters to play in this game. He is incredibly engaging. You jump around the map, an incredible amount of skill showcase. Like, you show your skill a lot. You don't really do that with tanks. And then when it comes to supports, I've not really mentioned supports very much, but when it comes to supports, they're alright. One big thing that I was very shocked by when it comes to this game is a lot of supports, they just kind of heal. And you might say, well, that's the job of supports. But I find, my first Lord in this game was Adam Warlock, because I find him so interesting to play. He has healing. He has an incredible shield in the Soul Bond that redirects damage to, like splits damage between all of the people who use it, and it's a great way to counter, massive ults that would otherwise destroy your team. And he's also pretty good at dealing damage. Mantis, also one of my favorites. These two are characters who, yes, they heal, but that is not all they can do. And I like that. I like that these characters' kits, the existence of these characters is not just to stand there and heal. It is to actually bring usefulness to the team and help their team in a way that is not just healing. But all of the other characters in this game is just healing, Your M1 attack just heals. Everything heals. Everything that you do heals. Every attack, every ability heals. And is that fun? Not really. I would, a lot of people play Cloak and Dagger, but me personally, I cannot stomach playing Cloak and Dagger, because I find her so, like, how do I say it? She's so uninteractive, unengaging, like non-engaging, You just kind of shoot anywhere and it will heal your team. Your abilities just heal. Like, she has her cloak ability, which is very interesting, very useful. But if your teammates press any button during your cloak ability, they will be taken out of the cloak. And they will most possibly die from whatever you're trying to shield them from. And that's not just Cloak and Dagger, it's just me personally who doesn't really play Cloak and Dagger. It's the same thing with Rocket. A lot of people just play Rocket. All they do is just sit there, shooting their healing orbs. That's I just find that boring. It's so uninteractive. Whereas tanks are kind of all just the same. You have two types of tanks, and they're all sort of just meant to sit there and take damage and wait for the DPS to do something. Supports, again, just kind of stand there healing a lot of the time, waiting for the DPS or the tank to do something. So it's sort of like, and I've been talking a lot about this, but it's to understand that when it comes to Marvel Rivals, it's such an uneven split of roles. So it is no wonder then that one of the first big controversies in this game was the supposed support strike. I was around the community very heavily during this time, and I can tell you right now, I have no idea if this was a real thing or not. People were talking about it on TikTok a lot. People were talking about it on YouTube a lot. People were talking about this on Twitter a lot. I don't use Twitter, but people are talking about it on Twitter. But I never encountered it in my games. I never encountered anyone saying, I will not heal this game. I've seen videos of it. I've seen videos where, streamers or popular content creators would find themselves in a situation like that. I saw people rant on TikTok and on and on and on all over social media. But in game, I didn't see anything. And that's what I find interesting about the toxicity in this game is, first of all, it all revolves around the three roles I just spent 20 minutes ranting about. It all revolves around the roles. And second of all, it all takes place in anywhere else but the game. You know what people do on Marvel Rivals? They go on Times Square or they go to the newly added beach mode and they e-date. Or Doom Match. You can do that on Doom Match too, I guess. People e-date in this game. They do not really talk, they do not really act that toxic. You will have some games, obviously. I think the worst part of the toxicity that actually happens in game is throwing. This season 8 or 8 with fan, whatever. I tried to do my placements for ranked. 5 out of 10 games, I had a DPS who died a few times and then just said they're throwing. People just give up and go next. You cannot do anything about it. But it is the most annoying thing in the world that you can do. If you play like this, please do something else. You are adding no value to mine or anyone else's life by doing this. But back to what I was talking about, like the drama happening online, the toxicity happening online. Online, if you go on TikTok and you kind of look up Marvel Rivals, you will see a lot of content that is, tribalism between roles, right? And something else that goes into this is, weirdly enough, is gender. Right, there's a lot of women who play Marvel Rivals, and a lot of those women happen to play support. Of course, they play other roles, right? But it does happen to be that a lot of you see a lot of women play support, and that's probably just it just so happens that you notice a woman playing support, and you're probably gonna notice it in your brain, but it just happens to be the case. And a lot of the community is incredibly misogynistic. That is another type of toxicity you will actually need in game if you happen to, use voice chat, which I don't. I do not use voice chat unless I'm with, friends in a Discord call or people I met on a designated, looking for game server. So we already have, people who will throw your game, and incredibly misogynistic people. I remember this one lady I used to watch on TikTok. I don't actually know if she still plays the game, but I remember around season 2 and 3 that she would play Invisible Woman. And, a lot of her, she would make a lot of videos on TikTok about how, she would be because she's a woman, a lot of the men in her games will just be incredibly toxic to her over voice chat. And I don't know if she posts anymore. She was a lady with like silver hair. She was very sweet a lot of the time, and she was pretty nice. I just happened to come across her videos a lot, and that was great. You know, like seeing this from someone's perspective, and like bringing attention to it. I still think it happens, but I also think, a lot of people just play this game with voice chat turned off. I do as well, and it's because of this specifically. It's stuff like this specifically that makes me not want to engage with my team. You know, a lot of, like I said, when it comes to the roles, a lot of people will also blame other roles for not doing their thing. Supports will blame tanks, tanks will blame DPS, DPS will blame the tank or the support or everybody. People dislike DPS people a lot. So, why would you have your communications turned on if you're just going to get flamed because the role you're playing? It's much less the character you're playing, it's more just the role you're playing. You could be playing any character, you could be doing good, but there will always be a role that is the scapegoat. Currently it's kind of the tank, because nobody can be asked to play tank, nobody can be asked to duo tank. So we're just gonna, attack the tanks, because there's only one of them, so it's easy to just flame them instead. I brought up the support strike, which seemingly happened, right? But there is a lot more, controversy that does happen online with Marvel Rivals. Well, it is a lot of videos about tribalisms. There's also a lot of streamer drama. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about, Kingsman, what happened with the 40K tournament. That kind of became unanimous with Marvel Rivals. I remember when it was happening, when it was coming out, like it was crazy that someone who takes the game seriously and wants to win is kicked out of a tournament and is lambasted only for the community to notice what happened and back him up completely. And that's another thing I really wanted to go into Marvel Rivals for as my last point, because I've been going on Marvel Rivals for a while. It is the fact that a lot of people who play this game, they don't really take it seriously. As you can see in the background, I've only been playing 18 versus 18 because right now I don't really want to play this game. I do not really want to play Marvel Rivals. So I asked a friend to get on with me and just play 18 versus 18, with me. Does this mode seem engaging? Not really, but it's something you can just play in the background, and it acts like any other mode. You get rewards, you get, you level up, you get, proficiency points for your characters. A lot of people who play this game, they just kind of play it because it has Marvel characters in it. Do I play it because of that? Kinda. I'm a very casual player. I used to really play ranked back in the day, back in the early seasons. I used to grind rank like an animal. But it got more unfun as the time went on. As the seasons went by, I found myself playing ranked less and less, and the game in general a lot less. Now I'll get on, grind the battle pass, get all the battle pass cosmetics, do all the events, have some fun with my friends, and I'll move on. I'll move on, back to Deadlock, back to Dead by Daylight, back to whatever story game I'm playing, back to my replay of Baldur's Gate 3 for the 1000th hour, For me, this game doesn't hit as hard as it once did. And it's very funny saying that, because what it once did is barely a year ago, right? But I think the community has just evolved and morphed in such a terrible way that I don't want to take the game seriously. I don't want to try and win. I just want to get the skin, do the event, enjoy my time. I'll play quick play. I'll play like quick play, like actual quick play modes. Yeah, sure. You know, but I think it's not the game is not made for tryhards. The game is made for people who just want to play a game with Marvel characters. Is there anything wrong with that? Completely not. Absolutely not. You know? There is nothing wrong with that. I believe it is totally fine. I actually encourage it. If you like Marvel characters and maybe you're not that much of a gamer, just give this game a try, You don't have to play quick play. You can play arcade mode. You can play 18 versus 18. You can just walk around Times Square as your favorite character. Like, just get the game and, play it. If you end up liking it and you want to play competitive, don't play competitive. Competitive is terrible because the problem is this is an incredibly casual game that also attempts to have a competitive scene. It is a very bad idea because a lot of the people who play competitive do not have the mindset to play competitive. And, that's understandable. But it just kind of ruins it for everybody else, I feel like. When people who don't really care about the game that much, like being good at the game, try and play competitive and just kind of, they don't have an intention of winning. There's a lot of toxicity in Marvel Rivals. In-game toxicity, such as racism and, hate against women, hate against people of colors. I didn't actually mention racism, but I think it comes with the territory. A lot of whatever game you play online, people will be racist. No place online is truly safe, I believe, for people of color, unfortunately. Fan bases, a lot of the time they're racist. Video game communities, a lot of the time they're racist. I feel incredibly bad because there is very little you can do. Similarly, for a lot of LGBTQ people, there's not really any place online. There is certain fandoms that are mainly, queer people, but at the same time, you may just not like that fandom. You may not like the piece of media it comes from, unfortunately. So, Marvel Rivals suffers from all of those things, but I think what it suffers most is what I went into is the tribalism around the roles of the game and the fact that the developers seemingly neglect, support, and tank characters in favor of duelist characters, in favor of DPS characters. I think that is the most simple way that you can describe Marvel Rivals and its issues in its player base is the free roles and the way they're not evenly distributed. Resources and skill. Like, God forbid, Hulk barely has any skins worthwhile buying, and he's been a character in the game since launch. Same with Storm, an amazing character in like the Marvel comics. She barely has any good skins. She's kind of a forgotten character. But regardless, not to carry on too much into a rant with this part, I really hope the community can get better and kind of just coexist with each other, but I kind of know it's not going to happen. We're going to have a duelist strike at some point, I'm pretty sure within the next year. We're going to have a duelist strike where the duelists are going to get, they're like, I'm not playing DPS anymore. You're all ungrateful. And I'm going to be like, oh, I don't mind. I'll play DPS. If you don't want to, it's going to be great. We finally got to talk about Dead by Daylight. And I initially started this video, idea. I just wanted to talk about Dead by Daylight. But I figured I'm not really a Dead by Daylight channel. I just kind of post about all the games I like. So I figured, the more I thought about it, the more I thought about the things I actually want to talk about when it came to Dead by Daylight, which is its toxicity mainly, I kept drawing comparison to games like Deadlock and Marvel Rivals, and I decided eventually, why not just make an entire video out of all of them? So, really, this entire video was kind of me just leading up to talking about Dead by Daylight. So now that we have all of the context and previous knowledge from Deadlock, from Marvel Rivals, I can finally talk about Dead by Daylight and compare its toxicity and its community to those other games. And the very first thing we have to kind of draw comparison to is, in Dead by Daylight, it's an isometrical game, which means one side plays the game very differently than the other, right? Most of the time opposing each other. So in Dead by Daylight, you have usually in the default mode, you have 4 survivors. And in the opposite side, you have 1 killer. And already, we have, a split down the middle. Tribalism, 2 sides, very similar to like the roles in Marvel Rivals. And as we'll see later, the comparison doesn't stop here when it comes to the roles in Marvel Rivals. Because killers are all very unique. They have their own powers, their own cosmetics, and their own perks that they come with. Similarly, survivors also come with perks, but survivors don't have any innate abilities. Survivors don't have anything that makes them special besides their perks. So what a lot of people do when they play Dead by Daylight is they'll buy a survivor and just to get the perks. Whereas when you buy a killer, they're never not going to be used. Like, there will be one point in your time as a Dead by Daylight player where you're probably going to play all of the killers. You're going to, get bored of winning on one killer constantly, so you're going to try others. This doesn't really necessarily apply to survivors. You might just not like certain survivors that you've bought, and you're just not gonna play them. You just wanted their perks. This also happens with killer, but I feel like it tends to be more that people pick a certain survivor that they will play non-stop. This one singular survivor, they will play it. Whereas killer players, they do play different killers. I feel like in general, playing killer and playing multiple different killers is actually very helpful. As someone who plays survivor and killer, I find it fun to play different killers, just so I can know how to best counter them when I'm actually in game. So I think it's good. I think it's generally very good, but you still do have people who main one killer, they main one survivor. But in general, the killer role has much more weight on it. The killers have abilities. The survivors don't have abilities. They can have abilities from perks, but that's very by the by. There's no innate abilities to the survivors. The killers do have innate abilities. The killers have different walking speeds, different chase speeds, different terror radiuses, right? There's a lot of at play when it comes to killers, and it is a very precise game, right? When it comes to perks, when it comes to the killers themselves and how their abilities work, when it comes to the hitboxes in the game, which can often be a little bit misleading, unfortunately. Like Dead by Daylight, like your survivor is hurt, your survivor is sort of angled forward. They're slouching over. It's like they're barely carrying themselves, but their hitbox, your survivor hitbox is still very much straight up, as if you haven't been hit yet. The visual is simply that your survivor is hurt, but that is not actually your actual hitbox, which may be very, misinterpreted at times, and it may seem like you're being unfairly punished. regardless, all of this is to say that I don't think I've ever seen more of a split in a community and more hate for the side that you play. A lot of the times in Dead by Daylight, what I find it to be is not really hate towards a specific killer. It is hate for the person playing the killer. For the, like, you playing killer is a reason to deserve hate. And I'm not gonna sit here and say only the killer gets hate. Survivors are also often bullied. The worst case of this is when you're solo queuing. As I've said at the start of the game, a lot of the time when you play these games, you are solo queuing. And something that can really unfortunately happen in Dead by Daylight is you're solo queuing and you happen to get put in a team with 3 people who are probably together, and they will bully you and get you killed and just make your game experience very unfun, which is terrible. It is genuinely terrible. But I will also not sit here and say that survivors are all angels, because a lot of the toxicity in the game towards killers is prompted by survivors. Survivors that feel like, you did not play fairly, you did not follow the rules, you did something they didn't like, your killer's too strong. There is a million excuses for you to deserve to be hated. I'm someone who primarily plays the pig and the plague. Now, I think that tells you a few things, but I'm gonna tell you right now, it doesn't matter if you play the pig, it doesn't matter if you play Freddy, it doesn't matter if you play Legion, it doesn't matter if you play like the least powerful character in the game, you will be hated if you win. People will be racist, homophobic, transphobic. People will utter the worst things known to man just because you killed them, just because you got them out of the game in like 5 minutes. Yeah, no, that's terrible. It is genuinely unfun to just try and play the game the way you want, try and play your killer the way you need to in order to try and win. And just for the crime of trying to win in a game, for trying to play properly, you are bombarded with hate. Some of them even go to your Steam profile. Some of them even try and DM you. Some of them you will be attacked. Do not put your TTV in your Dead by Daylight username, because you will be attacked on your Twitch. It is incredibly moronic the way people just hate you if you play this game. And there's a few things we have to go over, of course, such as sort of the rule book of Dead by Daylight, right? The rule book for killer, mostly, because survivors don't really have a rule book. They don't have anything they're not allowed to do. Survivors can bring full exhaustion perks, they can bring full gen perks, they can, gen rush, they can have 1 second heals, they can all of that, you play survivor, you have 16 perks available to you in your entire team. If you play survive with friends, you can coordinate perfectly, right? The killer gets 4 perks in a list of handbook rules. If the killer tunnels, which if you don't know what tunneling is, it's basically when the killer hooks you, and as soon as you're unhooked, the killer will be right back on your tail. You're not allowed to tunnel. You're not allowed to slug, which, for those of you who don't know, slugging is basically when you leave someone on the ground and you chase other people, right? You're kind of playing the long game of having people bleed out. That's how they die, right? That's how you win. You trying to have a mind game around, people will flock to try and get the person out, and that's when you start taking them down one by one, right? You cannot slug, you cannot tunnel, you cannot camp the hook, you cannot camp the generators, you're not allowed to get a 3-gen, like if the game has a 3-gen, if the survivors 3-gen themselves, that's just, you got lucky. That's just, you should have let us win, because it's not our fault that we got a 3-gen. If you use Lightborn, that is your fault. You shouldn't use Lightborn. I should be able to fucking flashbang you and flashlight you and stun you and head on you and stun you with a pallet. Like, I should be able to do all of those things, as a matter of fact. If you bring hex perks, well, you're a chud. You don't know how to play the game. That's a crutch. But, and I could go on, but you're kind of starting to see a pattern. All of the things that the killers are not, encouraged to do by the community, all the things in the handbook that are like, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not tunnel, thou shalt not slug, they're all very normal tactics. And you have a lot of people looking into Dead by Daylight, like from other games, from the outside of Dead by Daylight, people who have actually never played the game, and they'll be like, they'll be bewildered by this stuff. And that's because in no other game would you have a community like this. Survivors who preach that if you tunnel, that is unfair. If you slug, that is unfair. If you use hexperts, that is unfair. Any other community, and you will be laughed at by acting the way survivors do in Dead by Daylight. But they have been allowed to behave this way. And Behavior, funnily enough, the company who created Dead by Daylight and manages it, they kind of clearly pander to survivors. At certain points, the game is survivor-sided and killer-sided, but, that's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that they genuinely just pander to survivors. The survivor perks are often more effective and more powerful and easier to actually use in-game than a lot of killer perks. A lot of the killer perks in the game require previous actions. They require specific inputs. They require a specific action to be done in order to activate, and then you can see if you're able to get any sort of effectiveness out of them. Survivors get a lot of cosmetics. They get a lot of cosmetics. They get a lot of, items that they can use. It's just it's very fair. People are more likely to buy cosmetics for the survivors. People are most likely gonna buy cosmetics for a character they relate to and like, and a lot of those characters are often gonna be survivors. You also have a 4-to-1 ratio, right? There's one killer for every 4 survivors. So a lot of the time, there's gonna be more survival players than there are killer players. So it's just normal to sort of, pander to them, It's also part of the fact that the game, when you play killer, you're in first person. You don't really get to see your cosmetics. So, when you play Survivor, a lot of the time when I play Survivor, a lot of the time I'm just kind of standing there, like running around and stuff, doing gens, but I'm just admiring my character and how pretty or cool they look. Because generally, the cosmetics in the game are great. They're really cool. But if I'm playing killer, I'm not going to get to see the cosmetics. And, well, what fun is there in that? Not being able to see the cosmetic you earned. Not to mention, the game is a terrible grind. I mean, you need an insane amount of iridescent shards to be able to buy an outfit or a cosmetic. Or even a new character. Not to mention the licensed characters that obviously you have to use real money to buy, which is also a little bit annoying, but it's kind of whatever, it's fine, it's not that big of a deal. All this is to say that you know, there's very clearly a misrepresentation or a mishandling of the roles in the game. Dead by Daylight should be, by all means, a game where the killers, or at least both sides, are given the same amount of the same amount of attention. They're given the same amount of care, of love, of content, right? When did I mention this before? I mentioned it when we're talking about Marvel Rivals. You know, the way that DPS heroes in that game get all the love, similar to survivors. And then tanks and supports, similar to killers in Dead by Daylight, are often relegated to the side, even though if you had no killers, you would have no game. I'm really happy to see that a lot of the people I've met who play DBD, they're killer players who want to also play Survivor, but they don't want to play solo queue, And I'm kind of happy to see that a lot of people do play killer. I cycle between the two. If I have people to play with when I'm able to play the game, I will definitely go for Survivor games. But if I'm by myself or I just don't feel like interacting with anyone, I am just gonna play killer games. And I think everybody should try their best to be a little bit of both. They should both play killer, but they should also play survivor. Not only does that make you actually better at the game, because you understand both sides, what both sides can see, do, the extent of their usefulness, what it feels like on the other side, on the other perspective, and where people are most likely to look for a stealth killer. I think both sides are very important to play. Very important. And it makes me very sad the way people strictly choose to either play killer or survivor. I find that annoying, and that's where I feel like a lot of the toxicity comes from. People will play survivor and will deal with some killers who, they will tunnel, they will slug, they will camp, play in ways that is kind of unfun towards the targeted survivors, and fair enough, that may not be a fun match, but what happens is they begin to resent the killer for playing the game because they see this behavior is accepted online. And this is two things that, this is something we can see in all three of these games, is that a lot of the sentiment from the game is carried online. The hate for certain characters in Deadlock is carried online. The hate for certain roles is carried online in Marvel Rivals. The hate between, killer and survivor is carried online, and then, that fuels other people. They're like, oh, I don't want to play killer, I'm gonna stay playing survivor, Dead by Daylight also has the issue where, if you play a certain killer, for example, if you play clown, a lot of people don't like the clown. I don't really see an issue with the clown. If you like the character, that's great. Me personally, I don't like the clown. He's like a weird character. But if you like the clown, why should people dislike you for it or hate on you for it? If you like the knight, which I like the knight, he's a big guy with a sword. That's awesome. I want to play the knight. Why are people hating on me? People who play survivor, they will see you play killer, they will wish your death. Okay? But if you played survivor with them, they would have been your best friends maybe. But because you play killer, you deserve to die. You serve zero purpose. That is what they're like. That is what these people are like, But let's say it kind of goes both ways, but a lot of the time it's all initiated by survivors. And that, survivors initiating this toxicity then leads to killers also initiating it. Getting angry about being gen rushed, getting angry about, people working as a team in groups, survive with friends, which is very fair to be annoyed by that. I think it's the game has not taken enough measures to even out the playing field between a survive with friends group and a killer who has to struggle against a team with full communication and perk coordination if they're taking things seriously. But not only do killers, like certain killers, have a bad reputation, it is also Survivor, right? Like survivors also hate each other, which is something very funny to see, right? We all know the typical consensus that Sable players are like stupid, right? We all know the consensus that people who play Leon are new to the game or have no idea what to do. We all know the consensus that Ace players are trolls. Like I guess it's just like it's like I forget what you exactly call it, but they fall into these categories because they play these characters. So you may say something like, "Oh, Sable players are the worst," and then you find someone who's generally a nice person, really cool to hang out with. They play Sable, and it's like, "Oh, okay." Like I have had situations like that where I was like, "Oh, I play Ace, I play Kate, I play V, I play Tori, I play Cheryl," and they're like, "Oh, I thought." I thought all Ace players were just chuddy little trolls. I'm like, no, I just like the character. He's cool. He's a cool gambler. I love gambling. I love wasting my money. I love that guy. I love Ace. He's a funny little guy. His cosmetics are pretty fire too. So it's the game just like people just I guess they just dislike each other too, like survivors between each other. But I think it's just it's just this attacks, these personal attacks on both sides. Survivors attacking each other and attacking the killer, and the killer is attacking the survivors. It is just a back and forth that it is constantly fueled aggression and hostility from social media, from in-game chats, from actions taken in game. Like a knight will tunnel you, and suddenly you hate knight players, you hate everyone who plays the knight. If you see a video of someone playing the knight, you're gonna be hateful because you hate the knight. Similarly, if you get really badly bullied by an Ace in your game, you will hate every Ace player. Anyone who makes fan art of Ace online, you will hate on them because it's Ace. It's just hilarious to me how much hate there is in this community. And in all of these communities, yeah, there is a lot of hate. But in Dead by Daylight, oh my god, for a game that needs both sides to coexist in order for the game to live, and mark my words, I think if this game ever dies, is because killers don't want to play the game anymore. And a lot of people in this current event, which I really wanted to bring up, this current anniversary event that is incredibly survivor-sided, a lot of killers they're not playing the game. They're not playing the event. They're just going to play the normal mode. But also a lot of killers, maybe they're just taking a break from the game because they have seen how little behavior values them. The new anniversary mode, if you're not aware, is incredibly survivor-sided, where survivors are able to heal all like each other at the press of a single button. Everybody gets healed, as well with other effects such as sprint speed, action speed, unbreakable pallets, teleports, and stuff like that, where the killer just gets a poison ability which makes it so survivors are unable to run. Is this a powerful ability? To a certain extent, yes, depending on if you can actually use it correctly, yes. Do you think it feels fun to play killer where all you get in this event is one ability where you slow down the survivors, whereas survivors are having the time of their life? I don't think so. And it's made a lot of people in the Dead by Daylight community, a lot of people who play killer, they just feel undervalued. They do not feel valued. I have not played as killer in this new mode. I'll tell you right now, I don't even play the new mode as a survivor. I don't play the new mode because I played a few games of this as survivor and I began to find it so incredibly boring. It is incredibly easy, it is incredibly boring, it is incredibly survivor sided, and I just find no fun in that. Killer or survivor. It like both, playing survivor is just incredibly easy. There is no fun in just, having all of these abilities available to you, and you're just constantly healing yourself. Whenever you're in danger, you ask someone to heal you. Is this the mode that they added was not fun, it was not great, and it has led to, I feel like, irreparable damage. A lot of people have just taken breaks from playing killer because, like I said, they just feel undervalued. They just feel just not valued by the game creators. In the same way that people who play Marvel Rivals, who play tank, feel very undervalued by the creators and the community. I don't think you'll ever have, like, I've never seen a game like Dead by Daylight where both sides and even the game creators, they just hate on one specific side. They just neglect them. They let them rot. The killer role is like rotting right now. With this new event, it is rotting. People who play killer are not having fun. They're just playing the normal mode. There's barely any killers. The queue times are incredibly short. Like, it's terrible. It is bad. And it's terrible for the game in general. And I don't understand at what point it became so feral for both sides to hate each other. It became so okay for both sides to hate each other. I find it so, I don't know, it's exhausting. It's mentally draining. Whenever I play Deadlock, whenever I play Marvel Rivals, whenever I play Dead by Daylight, I just turn off any communication with random people. Like, I'm gonna talk with my friends, over voice chat. But when it comes to these games, I don't want to interact with the people who play them because they are all morons. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them are morons. A lot of them are very toxic. A lot of them are just very exhausting to play with. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get to here is the different types of toxicity at the end of the day are all incredibly exhausting. Even Deadlock, even if it's not personal in Deadlock, like, the people will still be assholes to you and just like make it about the character you play. It's still exhausting. In Marvel Rivals, you will be playing solo tank. You will have your healers and your DPS clowning on you. You are by yourself and you have no one to help you or defend you, and you are alone, and they will flame you, they will clown on you, and make you wish you never played that round. And then in Dead by Daylight, God forbid you play killer, God forbid you do well as killer, because people will hate on you. People will despise you. And it's hilarious to me. It's hilarious to me that people hate each other that much in a game where both sides have to coexist. How do you fix this tribalism issue in Dead by Daylight? You just make people play both roles so they understand the struggle. I largely believe that the reason people the reason people are so hateful towards each other is because they don't understand the struggle. People who exclusively play Survivor do not understand what it's like to play a lower tier killer who doesn't have amazing map pressure or doesn't have, some insane killing ability. Like, they just don't understand how rough it is that sometimes you do have to slug, sometimes you do have to tunnel, sometimes you do have to use Lightborn, because the entire enemy team has, the entire Survivor team has lanterns, they have flashbangs, they have all of those things, sometimes you do. Similarly, killers should also play Survivor and maybe, see how it's like to be, tunnel, to be slugged, to be camped, to be, to be locked in the basement for the entire game. Like, both sides should understand what each other feels like. And I think that's the most important thing. That's what we're not doing, is the more this festering hatred of the roles goes on, the more people are gonna be more steadfast in just playing the team they're already in, and they're not gonna touch Killer or Survivor. It's hard to fix, but I feel like if they really wanted to put their head into it, they could. They could have this fixed. As for will they? I don't know. It's really unfortunate. I generally believe that Dead by Daylight. I hope that Dead by Daylight will not die due to this, and that it will eventually, be able to bring the people together. I hope for that. Regardless, I've talked a lot. Did any of it make sense? I don't know. I hope it did. I hope people enjoyed listening to me talk. But now I'm gonna go. This video ended up being way longer than I expected. As a video that really was only meant to start as a DVD video. So, thank you for watching, if you made it this far.